with the board on doing a transition, partly because I was the founder, and founders shouldn't stay forever. But as I shared with the board, my husband was fine one day and dead the next in 2013. And he ran a nonprofit which just was in absolute chaos when he died. And it was just, I'd been wanting to do a transition, but it was such a wake-up call that, okay, you really have to help organizations through that first transition, and that I really, to be a responsible director, I really had to help the organization through the transition. So I did that, and the organization hired a new director, and I worked most of last year on helping with fundraising and getting them oriented, and I wrote another book. I've written a few books along the way. The one I'm most known for is a book called Organizing for Social Change, which is kind of a handbook for community.
Bible.
It's referred to as the Bible for organizing. It's in its 5th edition. It's kind of out there. But the book that I actually feel the best about in terms of it making a difference on social change, because for me, writing books is only about trying to help move an agenda, right? I did 2 editions of a book on wage theft that I think has helped frame the conversation in the country around the issue of wage theft, and that's been fun. And then the book I just finished was a book on how to build worker centers, which is one of the things that we did at Interfaith Worker Justice for the last 10 years, was building these kind of drop-in centers that help workers who are not in unions and who generally are experiencing wage theft or being abused in some way. I also have twin sons who are 21 years old, who are just the most wonderful young men ever. And they both are graduating from college, one next month and one in June. Yay! Yay! So that's right. I'm glad to stop paying. So I finished the work last year, and then in the fall, I'm like, okay, now what? Now what, right? And I felt like, okay, I'm still in great health, and I have a good stint left, right? So what should I do? And I couldn't imagine myself not working at the intersection of faith and justice. It's just, that's been my life, right? And so honestly, if there had been a Virginia Interfaith Center based in Chicago, I would have been a little happier. But
and colder.
And colder, that's true. Yeah. But so I applied for the job, and I met twice with the interview team and the board. And I tell you what drew me to the work was certainly the mission, right? The core mission is, that's who I am. But the history of effectiveness of the organization, of really having won a bunch of stuff over the years, was very impressive to me. Thirdly, the board, I thought, was just, everyone was so kind and gracious and willing to roll up their sleeves and work. A small but talented staff, right? So there was some potential there. And then, I didn't know what the chapters looked like, but that there was already some structure with some commitment around the state. Those things really drew me to the organization. The other piece that I've learned since taking the job is just the incredible reputation and consequently access that the organization has. It's been so wild to me. Like, if I want to meet with somebody about some issue, I can call them up and they say, "Oh, Virginia Interfaith Center, yes, we'd love to meet with you." And these people don't, huh?
Even the Republicans?
Well, not so much. But, I haven't actually been reaching out so much, I have to admit. But I mean, I call somebody in the governor's office and I can get a return phone. It's just, again, And it's not because of me, right? Because they don't know who I am, right? It's completely around the organization. So again, it feels to me the history of effectiveness, the history of base building. There's just a lot to work with, and that gives us incredible access. It also means, that there's an incredible responsibility for all of us to use that access, to use that potential, to really try and make a difference. So I've talked to lots of people and am continuing to meet with people and really want to hear from you all. But I kind of view my work of the next year or two in kind of three categories. First, for me, is working with the chapters and the board to figure out, of all the social justice things that we could do, what are the ones that we should really focus on? Because if we really want to be effective, we can't do it working on 10 or 15 things. We can take positions on those things, right?
Yep.
But we can't really work on that many things, given, we're a small staff and, not that many chapters. And so we really have to narrow and focus the agenda if we're going to be effective. And so I'm kind of working through a process trying to get to, okay, because, everybody has their issues that they want to work on, but we can't do them all. So I worked with the board first at our March meeting on, what's the criteria that we're going to make that decision, right? How are we going to make the choice between all sorts of good things? So the criteria that the board came up with were really 5 key ones, and then there's some smaller, less important ones. But the 5 key criteria are that the issue fits within our mission, right? Secondly, that it's of deep concern to the religious community and unifying within the religious community, right? We're not going to work on things that are going to be divisive for us internally. Thirdly, that it engages priority constituents, and the board has identified those as Latinos, African Americans, disenfranchised folks, and young people, right? So we're particularly interested in issues that can engage some of those priority constituents. Fourth, that we think it can be winnable within a reasonable period of time. That, life is too short for us to only be banging our heads against the wall, that we've got to figure out. And frankly, given Virginia's legislature, that's a little challenging, right? Now, the truth is,
God's time, Kairos time, Virginia time.
right. So, okay. And then fifth is the issue one on which we either have or can build capacity, right? Because we got to build the capacity to do the work. And capacity is both people, it's money, it's, can we get the resources we need to do the work. So that's the criteria. Now, the board then asked me to do, and I proposed doing some research, trying to figure out, what fits that set of criteria. I think we are committed to sticking with the issue of Medicaid expansion. Given how much work we've done on it, given the critical nature of it for Virginia. And people believe, I've talked to probably some of the best lobbyists in the state on this issue, and folks think, what people say is, we will eventually get Medicaid expansion. It's really a question of when, right? It's going to happen. It's a question of when. And, can we push it over in 2017? The thinking is, if the Dems win the White House, that there will be a big move to, okay, the Affordable Care Act is not going away, we might as well just go ahead and do something here. On the other hand, there will be folks who don't want to give the governor a win in his last term. So again, I think what people believe is we've really got to get the Republican leadership, most of whom think this makes sense, even though they haven't been voting for it. we've got to get them taking the leadership on this in both the House and the Senate. And that there is a decent shot on this in 2017 if we can bolster the Republican leadership on this issue. And people believe we can do that in 2 or 3 areas. One, that there's a number of the more moderate Republicans that are in districts that have voted for Obama. So these are districts that go back and forth. These are the typical purple districts. If
Northern
we can,
Virginia.
what? Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Which means you all become super important in that strategy, right? That we've got to get those purple Republicans, there's Republicans in purple districts, really helping lead on this. And in the districts in the Southwest where the hospitals are closing because of this issue, we've got to get them speaking up on it economically, right? And so that becomes the way that we think we can win, and thus the place where we all need to be contributing on